There we go. All right, so when we're looking at Bong Sau, the first thing that we see, kind of the first place we see Bong Sau in the Wing Chun system, right, is in Sau. It's at the very end of Sau. We're in here, we bring it out, and we corkscrew it forward. What are our benchmarks? Go ahead and leave that out there. I'm gonna put this up. All right, so let's drop your shoulder a little bit. So we want the elbow about in line with the shoulder. Now granted, the bong can be lower than this, and of course it gets more comfortable on the shoulder that way. But we generally don't want the elbow higher than this. This is, again, like I was just mentioning, it starts becoming more and more problematic. It becomes less comfortable on your shoulder the higher you go, right? This is no good. And then when we add to that the fact that, generally speaking, we want the wrist lower than the elbow, well, you know what this is? This starts becoming a shoulder lock. Yep. Right? This is what we use in catch wrestling to break somebody's shoulder. So let's keep the shoulder packed down in the socket, right? So you have to use your lats. You have to engage your lats to kind of pull. So think about this, press down with your elbow into my hand. There you go. So that's going to help keep the shoulder packed down here. Other than that, I'm just trying to find your center. All right, so let's bring the elbow in, back down a little bit. So there's kind of standard position, right? Now the next part is, I want this bone on the center, right? Now when you're practicing on your own, put it on your center. Just line it up with your nose kind of idea. Really, I guess line it up with the pit of your throat because, you know, below the shoulder like we were just saying. So that's going to naturally put an angle into your arm, right? So if we drop his arm, you can see this roughly 137.51 degree angle. And that is kind of the angle that we use as kind of our standard, right? It's the same angle we use for Tan Sau, for Sau. It's not open like this, right? Where we have full bone alignment here, so it's a very stable position, but it's completely open, it's not protective, right? We have maximum muscular tension at 90 degrees, which, of course, when we use Lan Sau, that's what Lan Sau is. Well, Lan Sau is an obstructing arm, right? It's a prohibiting arm, it's a barring arm. It is a block, right? Lan Sau is load bearing, Bong Sau is not. So we need a lot of tension here. Bong, we don't need that tension. And by keeping it extended forward, not only is he going to be more invasive inside my guard, right, which is important, but the other thing is that he's kind of keeping it as a threat, right? And this is important, right? If we're fencing, I'm always trying to keep my tip online unless I'm trying to bait him in, right? Unless I'm trying to invite him to do a move so I can respond to it as a, you know, clever counter fighter or something. But generally speaking, right, we want to threaten with the weapon. And while we generally don't use Bong as a weapon, though we'll get to that in a second, having basically being tipped forward is going to be an important thing. Now what he's doing here with his wrist is not necessarily bad because he's fairly relaxed, but a lot of people will try to put a crook in their wrist here, and that's completely unnecessary. Right? It adds extra tension that doesn't do anything. So we want to make sure that we're not purposefully crooking the wrist, just kind of let it hang. You want that palm facing forward though, right? So in catch wrestling we refer to, you know, the cutting bone, right? So you're just referring to the bone of the forearm here, cutting up through. Well, you'll notice then if we go back, so bring it back to your chamber. As he brings it out like he would in Sau, notice how he's corkscrewing it forward. Right? No, you went too far. Right? But that becomes an important point there, right? That corkscrewing action creates this kind of gear motion, like the teeth of the gear clicking in and moving the next thing over, right? So now let's fix that, right? Now I'm not making fun of you, Ruben, right? But what you did was you kind of chicken winged your elbow out to do that. And that's something that I want to avoid. That's one of the things that Sifu hammered in on us. All right, so bring it back to your chamber. As he brings that arm out, I don't want his elbow line to change. So as he brings this out, he needs to bring this out pretty much forward and start corkscrewing. I know we talk about the elbow all the time, but move from the thumb as he drives it forward, and that's far enough. Right? As he drives it forward, that's going to bring the elbow up into the position it needs to be. If he lets the action happen at the wrist on this, then he's not going to need to chicken wing the elbow. So this is one of the very few times where I'm going to say think about the hand or think about the wrist. Most of the time we talk about the elbow, we talk about moving from the hips, right? We talk about moving from the core. But this is one of the few times where it's actually more beneficial, especially at the beginning stages, to think about it up here. Because when we think about it at the elbow, we end up doing the chicken dance, and nobody wants to do that. And the cool thing is, by doing it this way, it keeps his elbow in the line. It keeps his elbow where it needs to be because he's focused on driving this out like a drill. A little bit too far in, right? And that brings that out. So, now that begs the question, why are we so specific? Why are we going to be so anal retentive about, hey, Bong needs to be this structure, right? Well, we have a couple of things for it. One, and this is the common thing, right? If his elbow's too far out, right, it's just easy to collapse his arm. Okay. It's a bad argument, but okay, right? And if his arm's too far over, right, again, it's easy to collapse him in at the shoulder because he's now working in towards my center line, letting me get my weapons outside of his line, blah, blah, blah. Again, that's a better argument, but still not the greatest argument. The reason why this is not a great argument is Bong Sau is not really a load-bearing technique. So Bong Sau is not like Lan Sau. It's not meant to resist, right? If I jam in, so drop your shoulder, right? Use your hips and your ribs, right? Drive this forward, right? So Lan Sau, he should not be collapsing, right? If I give him some force. Bong Sau, however, he's not actually meeting my force. He's rolling my force off. So honestly, we're not worried about this. Internal rotation is not a super strong position. So we're not that worried about this being a particularly structural position anyway. We just want enough body structure that it doesn't collapse prematurely. So the bigger point of all of this is what it does to me, okay? So now, in a fight, you're never going to go from chamber. Chamber is just a formal position. It can be other things, but we won't go into that. Right? So if, let's just say a Sau scenario, right? If we're just the one hand is fine, right? If he's in, go ahead and be Tan, right? If I'm in here driving in my food, right? All he has to do is roll that thumb over. Nope, you went too far. Right? There you go. See, he keeps that in the center. Now, I'm not going to move anything. I'm just going to hold him in place so he doesn't move. And I'm going to extend my arm in the trajectory that it's in. Where am I going? I'm shaving just past his face. Right? We're creating these shaving angles on purpose. Right? We've talked about this before. Because we're going to add in hip work. We're going to add in footwork, which is going to give you more margin to work with. Right? But this empty handwork by itself, standing still, we're trying to create that baseline of, at the very least, you're creating a wedge that doesn't allow me to come in direct on. And even if it does hit, it's going to be a glancing blow, and you can take glancing blows more than you can take square hits. Right? I mean, just general idea. So, from a Sau perspective, right, because we always want this kind of hands down elbow, or hands up, elbows down type of guard. When I give him pressure, right, all he has to do is roll, and it's immediately taking me off, right? Now, if I know that's coming, I can make adjustments and I can stay on line. But we're not playing that, right? If I'm punching or I'm viewing or any other thing, right, I'm going to be committed to my movement, which means that as long as he's intercepting an honest attack, it's going to do this. Straight attacks, obviously it's not going to work around attack or anything like that. So that's a Sau perspective. But how often does Sau happen, right? You have to create a bridge first. So we can look at this from another perspective, right? If he's on guard, just for the sake of the demo, let's put this hand forward. You can do this in other ways. But if he's on guard, let's make this a little more central. Right? And again, I'm not having him take a fighting stance or anything like that. We're keeping this super simplified just for the sake of argument. Obviously, we would be doing this from fighting stances and moving around and all that. So as long as he's there, if I come in and I strike at him, right? His hand is pretty much ready to intercept it. Now, he could just do Bong there, but there's a good chance I'm not going to be just trying to punch him straight, right? And in fact, if he's in a guard like that, he might be better off just pocketing, right, and moving my hand up. What should I do as an intelligent fighter? What should you always do? Take an angle and move, right? There's a nice window here to punch him through, so that you don't have to go through this, right? If you're sitting here beating the crap out of somebody's hands, you're not fighting as well as you could, right? So you find ways to move in and cut across. This is a great example of why we might use Bong Sau. All of a sudden, his Tan Sau, his guard, whatever, his Man Sau, is no longer available to work, at least not well. Literally the closest tool to the incoming threat is his elbow and his forearm. He can make a bridge from directly underneath and roll me off. So no matter how, and keep in mind, I'm not taking a huge angle. I'm not coming out over here and coming this way. He wouldn't need Bong at that point. He should just follow me, like kicking in the nuts or something. All right? All I'm doing is coming in off the line just a little bit. And as I do that, as I get past his hand, all he has to do is corkscrew. Beautiful. And it's gone, right? So I was getting past an existing guard, and he put up a new guard. We do the same thing in fencing all the time. Adam's been part of the fencing club for a little while now, as well as I have. And when you play the rapier game, most of the time you spend your time here. You just move back and forth, right? That's about it. But every once in a while, something comes in around, and you got to come up. Right? My tip is hang down. It's Bong Sau, right? Bong Sau is just a fencing guard, right? So all you're doing, the primary use for it, there's a couple of ideas in fencing for it too, but the primary use for it is we're getting past your standard guard and it's a backup, right? It's a backup tool. That's an important distinction there, right? Now, I should say this one thing, because traditional martial arts is really, really full of this. Don't pose, right? We have that old phrase, I don't remember the Chinese for it, but it translates roughly to Bong must not remain. So you don't want to let Bong come in and just hang out. That does nothing. You take the punch off, that's great, you didn't get hit, but now you're stuck like a statue and you're going to get hit with the next thing, right? So you always want to move back to that elbow down position, right? Because you don't want to stay exposed. That's important. Don't stay exposed, right? So if I come in, he uses Bong Sau, yeah, and he comes into the next thing. And he might want to move, he might want to do other things, right? He might want to enter in for an attack. There's any number of things he could be doing, right? So that's on the defensive side of things, right? That's from the Chi Sau perspective. Now when I'm giving him pressure, he's responding to that. What about offensively? Well, this is fun, right? So offensively, say I'm on guard, right, and I'm coming in, Adam, whatever, he can shoot in, nope, don't move yet. I'm going to tell you what to do, right? So, right, say I'm here, right, and I'm even covering my line, I'm, whatever I'm doing. He can literally shift his hips and let his hand dip inside, but you don't need to turn any more than that because you don't want me to start flanking you. He's going to start driving this forward first, and then the last second, as soon as he feels me coming in at him, he's going to roll this off. I'll go for the straight. There we go. The reason this can work, and I say can because nothing's 100%, is because if he starts coming in down the pipe, what am I prone to do? I'm prone to block him. If I pop or I fook, something like that, I'm giving him pressure to play off of, right? So now he's using a defensive tactic offensively by using a bait and then rolling it into something, right? I know I haven't shown you this yet, but you're learning it now, right? So we're in here, he throws a straight down the pipe, and as soon as he feels me block, he rolls in the bomb, right? And then he can bring that other hand, strip my hand off, no, strip the hand off, yeah, and punch me, right? Something like that, right? Now I've used that in sparring with you guys. It's something I encourage you to test out. Obviously harder to do under pressure, but it can be done. Here's the thing, anytime you throw a bait, a feint, something like that, it needs to be believable. If your opponent doesn't believe it, it ain't gonna work. So this is an important thing, right? So he has to absolutely, or in this case, I have to absolutely believe that when I'm throwing here, that punch is a threat. Because if it's not a threat, I'm just gonna, spank him and move on, right? Because there's no reason for me to respond to something that's just garbage. But if he throws that through, and as he makes contact and rolls it, so it's one smooth movement, that takes me offline for a tenth of a second, and if he knows what he's doing, if he's playing forward, that other hand's behind, he's stripping me off, or he's using some other tactic. It's a really cool concept. He can even use that as that BG style elbow entry, right? So there's some really, really cool things that you can do with that, right? So that's one way to use it offensively. The other way, and this is what I said I would get back to, using it as a strike. Some people do this. We are not the only ones to do this, but very few people use Bong as a strike. Bong corresponds to a corkscrew hook beautifully. Absolutely. Now you can do this as a palm too. So this is one of those things where, right, say I did come in on the inside like this. Well, I don't want to use this here necessarily because, or whatever reason, right? Fabricated reason, magic and unicorns and leprechauns will eat my shoes. I don't know, right? It doesn't matter. So as I'm coming in here, I can bring this around and knock in on it. Or I can be a little more direct than that. I can just stay on the outside, and I know he's going to try to block something. So as I come in, I cut low just to make sure he stays low. And as I circle, put that around. I catch you guys at this all the time, so you need to learn this one because you're my students, and my students need to be better than me. Right? Or I like to enter with Fook. Fook is fantastic. Fook gets way underused. Right? So if we're on guard like that, right, I can literally just drive in with Fook. That creates so much tension in the other guy because you're getting your hand right in his face, you're crushing in on his arm with your elbow, and you're right there. Right? So as I'm doing this, and I just hook off, and it's right there. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, obviously, the other hand has to be alive and present. You can't just let it hang out because you can still get countered.
So that was a Fook punch, huh?
Well, it's Bong. It's a Bong punch. I just
you started with Fook, that's it.
right? So you could have pressure on the inside, hew it around, and flip it over. That's more of a Sau application, right? You could enter with Pak and let it skip over. You could enter with Fook, let it roll over. You could enter with Jump, let it roll. Right? There's a lot of cool things. Or you could just make it look cool and just sneak it over. You make no bridge at all. But it's Wing Chun, so you should work off a bridge, at least sometimes. Right? So Bong Sau is this really, really useful thing, but it requires a few precision pieces, right? We need it extended, not collapsed. Right? We need a nice line, roughly, from the shoulder to the elbow. Right? We don't want the elbow outside or inside too much. Generally speaking, you're not strong when the elbow is when you're in internal rotation, the elbow's above the shoulder. It's just not a strong position. Bong Sau kind of works from here down to here. And don't let anybody tell you Bong Sau is not for head punches. Bong Sau works just fine for head punches, right? And people say this, well, it's here and I'm here, so the Bong Sau doesn't work. Well, you shouldn't be catching it here, right? Wing Chun, here, hold your arms up. Straight, 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 straight. That's Wing Chun range, right? That's how we measure up to the dummy. All right, so you can get back on guard, right? So I'm going to move my back foot back just so I'm in a fighting stance, but you'll see my weight stays here. If he waits, if he waits here, that Bong's going to do nothing, right? Let's bring this outside, right? If I come through and he makes contact as I'm extending, as long as I'm not fully extended yet, it doesn't matter that I'm taller than him, it doesn't matter that I'm targeting his head. All we need to know is that my elbow is below his elbow, right? And with the exception of a few untrained people, nobody in the world has an elbows up guard. Okay? Most people either have their hands stupid low, or they have an elbows down, hands up guard, which means you have opportunity.